last time, we talked a lot about just the vision and what Christ Church South Philadelphia is going to be about, which is not that big a plan. We just want to go into the city and love Jesus and love each other and love our city and our neighborhood. And that's what we really want to be about, and just see what God can do through that. So last time was kind of all about dreaming. And it was fun, and it was exciting to be able to dream together. Tonight's going to be more, okay, what does real life look like? Well, this is a dream. What does this dream look like on the streets and in reality? Because we want to have both. We want to have vision. We want to be inspired. We want to have our hearts stirred. We also want to count the cost. And Jesus tells us to do that. Jesus tells us to count the cost. We didn't start by counting the cost, because we want to start with vision and what we believe God can do, but we don't want to miss the step of counting the cost as well. So tonight what we're going to be doing is, this is actually most I'm going to be speaking. The rest of my time I'm going to be talking to people and interviewing people who had done this before. So hear from some church planners, hear from some folks in Philadelphia. I think it will hopefully be a resource to you all. And then we'll have an open time for question and answers. So as people are sharing, feel free to write down questions. We'll have, I imagine you've had questions maybe from last time. So those, we're going to have longer question and answer time in this one. So just feel free to interact with that. So that being said, I'm just going to pray, and then we'll get into the agenda. So let's pray. Dear God, I just pray that you would come and you would be with us now. That, as always, more than anything, you would use what happens tonight in conversations we're about to have just to stir our affections for Jesus. That whether we're called to stay here in Malta or go to Philly, that Christ would be preeminent in our hearts. You would be our first and great love. So I pray through what's shared and through what's heard, through how the interaction goes, that really will be the first effect. That we would just love you more. And Lord, I also pray that it would just be clarity. You're a God who gives clarity. You're a God who gives faith for decisions. So I pray that you would be stirring faith. Again, whether it's just there to go, even throughout this meeting, you would be stirring faith for these people here. And thank you for these people here, Lord God. Thank you for their hearts that are open to being used by you. And I pray that, Lord God, you would bless them. And you would use them as missionaries in their neighborhoods, in their workplaces, wherever they find themselves. That Christ would be the first love, be the first on their lips as they speak with other people. So Holy Spirit, we just pray, and we ask that you come and be with us now. And then Lord, we also want to pray that you would be with the people in South Philadelphia. That regardless of who's going to come, Lord, there are people there that you have. You have many in that city, Lord God. So we pray for that. We pray, Lord, that you would soften the soil, that you would go ahead. The Word of God would speed ahead of us, so that when we come, Lord, we might be able to share the gospel. We might be able to see your gospel affect people's lives. Would you do that for the glory of your name? In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So we're going to do this kind of like Jay Leno style. So I'm going to call out our first guest, interview them a little bit, and I'll call out the second guest, and we'll call out the third guest. And just so you know where the evening's going, first guest is going to talk about what is it like to plant a church. So my parents are here. They want to talk about that, which is obviously planting a church is a lot different than this. So what was it like to plant a church? Then I'm super stoked that a good buddy of mine who's fast becoming a dear friend is here from South Philadelphia. So he planted a church about 3 years ago, Grace and Peace Church, and he's living the dream that I talked about 2 weeks ago. And so I benefited so much from him. And I'm excited. I just told him So I'm excited for you guys just to get to know him. He's brought some folks with him who are also there and would love to talk with you. Some different folks from different seasons of life that I think would be helpful. So going to give him some time. That's Pastor John Olsen. And then last one I'll bring up another guy that's becoming a fast friend of mine. And that's Festa, who's the real estate agent that we've used. He was born and raised in South Philadelphia. Lived there for a large part of his life. And really knows the history of like every street in South Philly. It's just a wealth of knowledge. So eager for you to get to know him. He's going to talk a lot about South Philly. Encouraging folks, we want to reach Philadelphians, so we need to be in Philadelphia in order to do that. And so he obviously has a great pulse on the real estate market, buying and renting, and he's going to give some information about that hopefully will be helpful. Hopefully helpful to you all. So with that, Mom and Dad, you guys want to come up and grab some stools and a mic? Pretty much, yeah, you can go stay awesome. So can you just tell us a little bit about what it was like to plant Community Life Church, now Solid Grace Church, some 20 years ago. So you guys came from a big church, went to a little church. How many folks again? 35. Including the kids. So yes. How many adults?
18 adults.
18
17
adults.
kids. Well, there you go.
So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what that was like?
I was thinking when you were talking, Jeff, about, you said the dream and now the nuts and bolts. And I thought, in some ways, it's like marriage. It's a sobering decision. You have to make so. Boy, you love that person. And I think it's the same thing with church planning. I mean, whether it's a call that God will let you know whether you're going to go or not. But it's exciting. It's fun. We had a ball. We loved it, and I still love it. We still talk about it. Anytime Kathy Bailey and I are in a room with more than 35 people, we cry. We say, "Do you realize? I mean, really, even here, this is bigger than our first church right now." And it's very moving to see God move that way. So that's kind of the big picture.
Yeah, I think that analogy is a great analogy. You have limitations, but the excitement of a wedding, right? This is just all joy, and oh my, what have I done? So I think you have sort of both sides of it. It's like, wow, this is a dream, and there's just so much excitement about it. And then there's this, oh my, what have I done? I'm in this thing for a while. And so I think our first meeting, forever. Church time, marriage forever. Joy of my life. Joy of my life. So, and I think we felt that our first meeting. I mean, our first meetings were in a home, so that was different. We were just in a home in Merchantville, and children's ministry was in the basement, and yeah, there was a Tupperware bucket for the offering, and I was on crutches, so I was preaching with my leg up, and we had one guy on a piano, and that was a little rough, and that's how it started. And then we moved into the church down in Breachy Road, and that first Sunday, we called it a dry run Sunday. It was just for the church, just for the team. And then we were going to have this public meeting. And I remember, I just remember preaching for like an hour and a half. And just thinking, something's got to work here. Somewhere the inspiration will come. It never came.
And I remember thinking, how do I signal to him?
So when your wife's giving you the pity look up front, you know you should stop. And I think we walked out of that first meeting as a planting church meeting, like, what have we done? And can we sneak back to Covenant Fellowship? Because they just had this big sending Sunday. Can we just sort of sneak back in and not get caught? So there's all that excitement. I think what I would say, there's a couple things that stand out early in church planting. One is the privilege to see God work. There is something, if you're called to go, and I want to emphasize, if you're called to go, and you need to know that. And we can come back to that, Jeff, if you ask about the sense of calling. But if you're called to do that, that there's this great privilege of you're on the front seat watching God work. Because you're praying about everything that's taking place. So every new face that comes in, every time someone hears the gospel, every time you see the grace of God function in someone's life, it grips you. Because it represents answered prayer. It represents God's activity and not your activity. So there's this thrill of being on the front seat. I mean, it's like literally the front seat, and I'm watching God do stuff. That was a real highlight. I think another highlight was the camaraderie with the team. Of just, you are a band of brothers in that moment. You are banded together, and you're going to work hard together. And so there's something of, we're laboring together. There's not nobody else helping you. You don't have the support of a big church, and we left the big church when we started. There's not a big program. There's limited gifts, and so there's all these things. But it's just us. It's just us. And that was a joy. Building our team and being with our team was just a wonderful time. Building the team to plan, and then sort of get the team in position for about a year, and then we expanded the team. And it was just a joy. And there's still deep bonds I have with all those folks 20 years later. Because of the labor that they were involved in doing. And that's where when people say, well, yeah, Kathy Bailey will cry. I mean, we remember the first wedding. You remember the first baby. And now we can't keep track of how many babies are being born. And, it's just impossible. But that first one was like, wow, are we ever going to have that? And then you have these answered prayers. I mean, there's 20 years later, you're still having the same sense of God's doing things. And they're just amazing. And you're watching them work. You're watching them work. And that's what you get at the end of it. It's not what we've done, not our strategy, not our gifts. I've watched God work. I've had a number of people come into the building and they say, this, like, you must be so proud of this. I'm thinking, I don't know that I had anything to do with this. I just felt like I drove by and watched God work. And there was no strategic master plan. God just does things. So I think just watching God work, that front seat, and then just the friendship with the team, the working hard together. We're all going to be exhausted. I don't know if there's anybody who goes through life that's not in one way tired or exhausted. So what are you going to be tired and exhausted about? What are you going to give yourself to sort of work hard towards? And that's church planting. We're giving ourselves to that mission, and that makes it a joy. It makes the hard work just wow. So they would be highlights.
Yeah. Sure.
I was going to say, it is hard work, but it's fun hard work. And it's kind of like this
What do
weekend.
you mean more like by the hard work? Like, what does that
Well,
like?
everyone had a million jobs. I was the only one that didn't teach Sunday school twice a month. I only taught once a month. And his daddy wanted me in the meetings, but I was the only one that did. So everyone taught. Oh, you forgot that. Our first Sunday, we weren't excused for children's ministry. 7 people were left. We preached for an hour and a half. It was just 7 people.
What are you thinking? Just kill them right away.
So everyone worked hard. So you could be teaching Sunday school, then you have to go around there and charge a book table, and then you have hospitality, you have people over, and you have, everyone was working, but it was fun, Jeff. Remember, it was fun. But everybody had a hospitality card, whether their home was a place that they could have hospitality, that everyone had a hospitality card, just welcoming people into their lives. And everyone worked really hard. Oh, and this is the one thing I wanted to say that was huge. And if you're really interested in going, you've got to talk to Kathy Bailey or Ruth Williams, because both of these women, this is the kind of servant you want to be. They were not just, oh, whatever you want me to do, I'll do, which is a great servant, because there's some people, you're always afraid to ask. So we had no one that I was afraid to ask, but these women, first, they were proactive. They didn't say, oh, ask me whatever you want me to do. What can I do, Kim? They would say, oh, Kim, I know you're speaking in 2 weeks. Can I watch your children? Or, Kim, I know that you have this going on. I'm trying to think of some of the ways
Just ways to serve.
They just ways to serve. And they were owning the church the way we were. It wasn't like Daddy and I were the only ones with all the ideas. People were saying, oh, I was thinking about, we all wanted to have people over for, dinner. And the hospitality was huge after church, having people over for dinner. So, but you would do that after teaching Sunday school and after being on the greeting team and after doing the book table, you would then have people over for dinner, or over for church. But it was fun. It was fun.
I think the work, and this is where I think the sober part comes in, and actually I think it's priorities. It's what am I loving and who am I following, who am I treasuring, and so I'm treasuring Christ, and so I think this is the sober part. It was a lot of work. People were serving, and everybody was reaching out. You weren't waiting to have a gifted person reach out to a newcomer because you had to do it. So people were there early, people stayed late. A guy like Mark Bailey, for literally a couple of years, that was vacation started Sunday afternoon and ended Saturday because he knew he needed to be there Sunday morning.
For 6 hours.
For 6 hours. So he was there, it was at least, because it would be like 7:30, 1:30, 7 to 2, and that's his day off. This man who's got a significant job. His job had an hour commute each way. And that's what he was given. So there's that sense of it's all hands on deck. And this is the other thing I think is important, and I know you're not going to be, it's event-driven, we have some event type things, but when the church is doing something, your attendance is crucial. Because if you're not there, it's noticeable. So this is the claim it starts to make. My schedule's not my own. I really need to think, I need to orient my schedule around church life. Because it's not like I can just say, if I'm not there, this person will pick it up. There isn't another usher. There's just not that other person to pick it up. So we had folks that really said, I've been doing it for years, I'm prioritizing the church calendar. So when we had an event, when we were doing something, everybody was at it.
Well, sweetheart,
and
people still live that way. It's not like we got people to stop.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, thanks. Well, I think I'd make that point that it still should be the same priority. I just think in bigger churches, it's easier to drift from that priority. It's easier to say, it's someone else. Someone else. There is no one else. There's just no one to turn to. And so in small groups, I lead a small group, and I don't always like going. And I lead it. But it's sort of that sense of, I've got to be there. If we're not there, if we're not the ones reaching out. So this is where there's that sense of, we can't do on the sideline being comfortable. We've got to reach out, we've got to prioritize. Very important. When you're absent, it really is noticed. And I think that's a cost. I might have to do family vacations a little bit different. But we always go away on the holidays. If we're away on a holiday, when Easter week, that means there's nobody in the church to do the work. Okay, this has got major claims. Now, I want to say on the other side, you don't outgive God.
Right.
So, and Jeff's here to church playing child in a sense. I don't think it costs my family anything. At the end of the day, I'm thinking, oh God, I'm thankful for those claims. I'm thankful that it wasn't left up to my own choices. I'm thankful for the lack of freedom, in one sense. I think that was God's kindness to sort of hem me and say, you know what? We're going to keep you on a narrow road and an important road. So I think the Lord in kindness said, seek the kingdom of God first. So I view, and I still view it, it's a wonderful privilege to be involved that way. And our day started early. I started setting up chairs for 10 years.
With his boys.
Yeah, with my boys. So.
And it's a great thing if you have children. Jeff was 8, 10, 8, 6, down to Andy was 2. And everyone had a part to play with that. Even all the kids were a big part of it. And they felt like they were a very important part of it. So, yeah.
That's good. I want to...
Jeff, can I say one thing?
Yeah,
one thing I wanted to say before we talk about well, I think this is another thing Kathy was really good at, is releasing her husband. Think about it as a mom and as a wife. Oh, your husband works 6 hours on Sunday, and he works 5 days a week. That means really Kathy's giving up Mark every Sunday too. Mark was doing the work. She had to give him up too. And she never made him feel good. She felt like that was what she got to do.
Right.
Releasing him was her part. So.
That's good. I want to circle around to the question about how do you know you're called? And I'm sure people will sort through that. But I want to have actually Jonathan maybe think about answering that one too. So that's we're going to get back in line. But so I'll circle back around to that. So why don't we come up, buddy? You want to call up here quick? This is my buddy Jonathan Olsen. Can you start by telling these folks where your church is at and your story, just a little bit about your church, and then tell us what is that? Here we go.
We don't have cool stuff like that.
And then just walk through. Just what does it look like, life in the city, South Philadelphia? So.
You know me well enough that I can't answer any of that.
Of course.
One, just it's a real privilege to get to be with you guys. It's pretty amazing to think that some of you, or maybe all of you, are called to serve Christ in this community in South Philly. So we're already down there with our boots on the ground. It's very cool for my three partners in crime that are with me here from South Philly to be with you. So I just want to say that it's a real, I feel like we're getting a blessing getting to be here with you guys. So, oh man, what do you want me to say? Be more specific, so I have more stuff to say.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your family.
So my wife is Rachel. She's at home. We have just had our 6th child. We live at 18th and Christian, which is 2 blocks north of Washington, if you know the city. So we're in sort of north South Philly, the northern part of South Philly. Everything below South Street, historically South Philly, but a lot of people say Washington is sort of the new dividing line. But anyway, we're in older African American South Philly, although it's historically African American. It's gentrifying. In some places it's gentrified, and it's gentrifying and gentrified with different kinds of gentrifiers. So it's not, it's a very, much like me, my last name is Olsen, you know, and needless to say, I'm not 6'6", blue-eyed blonde Norwegian. I'm adopted. So that, you know, I'm Puerto Rican Italian, you know, and, you know, that's kind of scary. So that's it. You better move on. There's fire coming out, boy. Church me. But our neighborhood's very ill-defined, kind of like me, or hard to define, kind of like me. But Rachel and I have lived there for 10 years, and we don't have a car. That might be a significant thing for some of you to think about. We haven't had a car in 7 years. That's been a real important part of our life and ministry, you know, on the streets there in South Philly. I married way above myself. That's probably the best thing I can say. I've got an awesome wife who gets the sacrifices that it is, but also the joys. She gets to experience the joys too that are pretty unique to church planting. But
as we sit, so you don't have a car. Walk us through what's life look like for Rachel with 6 kids, and like what's she doing during the day, and what's going on with that?
Really silent in here.
You were really sitting here.
Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. She's so we homeschool, which is an interesting thing to do in the city. That's we're not dogmatic about that. That's kind of what we're doing now. To some degree, we hate it. It's really hard. Yeah, you know. So Rachel's under a lot of self-imposed stress every day by doing school, but. You know, doing homeschool also gives us the freedom to really roll with the moment neighborhood. So, you know, our kids are really engaged momentarily with what's going on in and out of our house. We have a real open door policy. Our lives are just very saturated in place. So, you know, Rachel's works full time as a homeschool mom and as a pastor's wife, and, you know, an evangelist's wife, and you know, really heads up our hospitality. So, you know, she's trying not to yawn a lot during the day. She's really tired, but you know, when you're doing what God calls you to do, you use the energy to do it. So even though it's fatiguing and challenging, she grew up in rural Southwest Georgia. I mean, middle of nowhere, Georgia. Like, I don't feel safe there. I feel real safe in South Philly compared to South Georgia. You know, I scream, so if someone comes in their house in South Georgia, nobody hears me. So, you know, it's a big change for her. She loves being where we are because she knows God's called us to be there. So it's not that it's just cool or sexy to be in South Philly. It's hard, really hard at times. But God's called us to be there, so that's why, you know, she's doing what she's doing, and I'm doing what I'm doing, and we're doing it with joy because the joy of the Lord is on us. We're doing what He's called us to do. But she plays more than a support role. She is front lines, you know, and she takes care of me in a lot of ways, you know, so I can be the shepherd and evangelist I'm called to be. And she takes care of our kids. You know, we have a lot of kids. You know, they're significant. Our church, you guys can tell you. I mean, just between 3 of us that have children here, you know, we have 13 children. That's representative. The church. Your kids, half of the church is kids. They're so significant to the evangelistic ministry, the life of the church plant, especially in the city. And that means things have to be flexible, and they're going to be noisy, and that's kind of part of it. Kind of like Jesus with kids in the New Testament, you know what I'm saying? Like your faith needs to look like theirs. So, they're central to what faith looks like in the church plant.
So how's it been for your kids living? What does it look like for your kids to live in the city?
Yeah, I mean, and again, these guys that are with me could answer this probably better than I could, but it's all my kids know. So it's not like I'm a guest in their neighborhood. I moved into the neighborhood 10 years ago when our oldest was 1. That's all they know. So, I mean, they don't really know anything other than, they don't, it's always noisy, it's always colorful, it's always energetic. That's just what they know. They're always out. We live a very deliberately outward-faced life, and especially when the weather's nice. I mean, there's no semblance of having like a dinner time because you can't just walk by people in the city. Not if you're missionally engaging them. That conversation is more important than having your dinner time. Now, I recognize that's easy for me to say. I'm a crazy church planter guy. My wife might say, "Oh, we need that dinner on time." That's kids to bed on time and all that stuff. But I mean, principally, our kids feel very central to what's going on. I mean, they know why we're 18th Christian.
Yeah.
They pray for neighbors by name.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier with some of the folks, with Jeff, and I forgot what I was going to say, but it'll come back.
Yeah. Well, talk about. You said some cool things about being out. So talk about what do you mean by that? Talk a little more about being out.
Yeah. So I mean, not having a car, and not if you have a car and you're part of this, that's fine. Not having a car, we are on shared space always, so we don't ever drive by anything. So the sounds, the smells, the sights, the souls, we absorb that all the time. Our family's like in relationship every moment of leaving the house. Whether it's shared space with our feet, or with the bus, or with the subway, or with the park, or with the grocery store, or just hanging on the stoop living.
Yeah.
Francis, one of the ladies here was talking about this. So that's major in South Philly. Just doing this, chopping up like this with your neighbors, that's like necessary in South Philly if you're gonna really missionally engage your place that God's calling you to. So just sort of not thinking about the privacy that a lot of us like. I like it. I don't have any in South Philly. I think I have sometimes a wrong sense of entitlement with privacy, like personally, and being in the city and being very kind of well known where we are and stuff like that. It's sort of, you don't have to be a pastor for this. If you're deliberately engaged, you you sort of are forced to live out where you need. And it's a privilege, but it's a draining privilege.
So talk about shopping. Tell them the story you told me about what shopping.
I don't remember what I told you, but I'll tell you a little bit about shopping. So, on the car, funny how many people say, "I need food shopping for 8 people." So I need to stand up. I can't sit still very well. So I have one of the long strollers, the double stroller. You know what I'm talking about, right? So I usually load up a couple of the Olsen kids in that on Friday. So I have plug for most pastoral duties on Fridays, at least people duties. And I load them up, and we actually don't shop in our neighborhood. And if they put us, we shop at Trader Joe's a mile away. If they put a Trader Joe's next door to my house, I still think we'd go to the Trader Joe's that we go to because of the relationships that we have there. So when I had a car, that's where we used to drive to go food shopping. We developed all these relationships. Car dies, and I thought, well, we need to keep food shopping in the same place. So we walk a mile, and we go by the bank, We go by the CVS to get grape juice for Sunday's communion. We use grape juice and wine, by the way. We make all these stops, and we stop by certain food carts to say hi to people that we developed relationships with. It's like a 4-hour event, but it's like a mini mission trip once a week for my kids. They realize that food shopping is more than just getting food for the 8 Olsens. It's to invite people to worship that we've gotten to know for 10 years. It's to continue to pray for people right there in busy, crazy Trader Joe's. Just crazy stuff. And it's a sight. I have a 3-year-old who pushes her own little cart back, after a mile walk, and she's like loopy, It's pretty funny, or sad, depending on, we kind of make it work. And the cool thing is that we're with people the whole time. So it's people that we either have gotten to know over 10 years, or it's people that, I literally, I kid you not, I had a lady ask if we would stop so she could take a picture of what she was seeing on Friday as she was watching us. My poor little kids pulling the cars, and she was loving it. She was a tourist. She's like, "Do you really food shop like this?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Can I take a picture?" Sure. Where are you going to put it? Phil's going to give me a call. So but it's part of our missional engagement with where we are. It's not, we don't sort of unplug from ministry and buy food. That's part of the whole city living, family calling, that we do. It's hard because I can't go food shopping there and do it quickly. So that's a sacrifice in a sense. I have to budget a lot of time for that. And sometimes I want to be faster. And I could make a choice to go to another place, but then they would know that I didn't come. And if I was honest and told them why, that wouldn't be a good move.
One more question. Unless I get another one while I'm thinking of this one. We were having a good conversation at dinner just about your kids and being out so much and just, not really as much in your house, but, kind of the city is your playground type of thing, hanging out in your backyard, hanging out in your front stoop. Remember you're talking about suburbanites. So, danger for children in the city. What are your thoughts about that? Yeah.
I'm sure this will only induce further discussions later.
It's actually mostly for my mom, who's worried about her grandchildren.
One of the things I said earlier was that, anyone that has a sense of concern for their children's well-being, for the well-being of anybody they love, that's a healthy concern, and we shouldn't condemn ourselves because we might parent or grandparent or a sense of protection of people we love, and that can look differently for different people, and we shouldn't condemn ourselves or let others condemn us or condemn others because we do things differently. So that's an important thing, just a sort of just a principial scope, to think about how people do things in the city. There are different dangers wherever you are. So I think that's an important thing to remember. There are more sinners in the city. You could argue that makes it more dangerous. You could also argue, I made the joke about being in South Georgia. It's actually not a joke. There are times that I actually am kind of nervous being in the middle of nowhere, Georgia. And I feel very comfortable with all the people in South Philly. Just there's something safe about that to me, which I know can seem a little twisted because my mother-in-law from South Georgia feels very comfortable in her private ponds, private woods kind of area. Feels very uncomfortable in South Philly. And so it's taking time to understand that people have different perspectives of where they are. But as far as kids go, you have to think about, we have a rule in our family, the kids are running, especially the little ones, they have to stop at the corner, the last corner house, not exceed the corner, because people in the city ride bikes on the sidewalks, which they're not supposed to do if they're over 12. Most people don't know that rule. And they're not thinking about a little kid coming across, the corner like that. So, you think about that kind of stuff, but you know, I would probably think, you know, my kids, you know, who are kind of athletic might throw a ball that way and go chase it into the street right out here, too. I mean, safety's a weird, we're not promised all of the safety from God that we think we're entitled to. That doesn't mean we don't act wisely. But I think, much like Brother was saying, you know, whose life is this that we're living, and why are we living it for? It doesn't mean you do dumb stuff, and you put yourself in the way of danger. But I think, even for children, living for Christ and raising a Christian family has its risks and dangers wherever you are. In fact, you might not really be doing it without taking some risks. Again, I'm not saying physical harm, you know, in trouble, but, you know, you could argue that it may, you know, being in the city, kids are becoming cognizant of things that they don't have to be in the suburbs, and maybe that helps them think a little more deliberately and missionally at a young age. I don't know. So I think it just depends on what you're going to emphasize. You certainly don't want to elevate, I'll wrap this up, you don't want to elevate the issue, you don't want to elevate any issue to the place of the gospel. Even if it's a relevant issue, you don't want to make it a gospel issue. Now, it might be an issue that you can't get over in good conscience before the Lord, and God's using that to help lead you in what you might be or you might not be called to. But, you know, we always want to keep even serious issues in their proper gospel perspective, which takes prayer and it takes more than just an individual response.
What about the village? The village, you mentioned like the village mentality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that ties into these things as well. Yeah, so I mean, my kids are being raised by my wife and me. There's so many of them by each other in some ways. By a church that I can't tell you how blessed I feel to be the pastor of, but also by a community of people, most of whom don't know the Lord. We share life together, and my neighbors have my kids' back. I mean, people are sensitive to kids in the city. They're thinking about people's kids. Like they're their kids if they're on their lot. And we were saying earlier, people moving in, you know, people are going to be sniffing you out and looking at those kids as you're looking at a house. And they will claim those kids as their own in good ways, in common grace kind of ways, in ways that you want. They might not be saved yet, but you want them to care about your kids, you know what I'm saying? And men, you want them to care about your wives and things like that, you know. But yeah, it's you know, our kids are not sort of pulled out of the world. You know, their care isn't just outside of the world. Their care is in the world, but it's in the name of Christ, and the Scriptures being what they're ultimately being trained by. But there are others besides just us involved in the overall care and consciousness of our children there. So it's a real privilege. It's an amazing way to connect with folks, to talk about Jesus, because what's at work in them is common grace and love. It's a beautiful thing that people who don't know Jesus are actually working out of love and concern and care. And there's all kinds of immediate roads to talking about free salvation through faith in Christ.
Yeah, that's good. One more question before I bring Bill up for you and John and Deb. Just as pastors, you guys both mentioned a couple times, if you're called. So in 5 minutes or less, how do you describe God's call on your life? In 5 minutes or less, how do you know if you're called or not?
Go ahead, sing your
Well, I think actually Jonathan said some good things here, even in this desire of safety. And I think there's just things sometimes we want to have that God doesn't promise. He promises He's with us, and He promises He cares for us. But that promise was just as true for disciples who were being killed as it is for Americans who are experiencing prosperity. And while I'm using that to segue into this, in calling, I think part of calling, you need to understand your motives. So why am I going? And what's calling me to go? There's a subjective side of this. I think look at process. I would say a healthy process. So am I getting counsel? Am I testing? So when Jeff had the call, I was saying, hey, it's one thing to have the romantic call to the city. You have the cities are where it's happening. That can be very romantic until you're there for a long period of time. Then you realize, you know what? There's nobody here cheering me week in, week out. There's just work, and we're not growing as fast as we want it to grow. Right? So this are expectations. What are your expectations? And so I think getting those motives, so if your expectations are about a role, then I would say, whoa, slow down, because your role can change. So if you're going out with an expectation of a role, that can change. If it's an expectation out of a relationship, hey man, it's with Jeff and the team. We were very clear with the team when we started. We're not existing for the team. The team's going to be disbanded. We want to build a church. And your role could change. This is one of the things, of all the many things that I've talked about Mark Bailey on, and all the ways he served, probably his greatest act of service was how he stepped out of roles. So he told me going in, I'm not here for the role, I'm here for the mission. And so I assume I'm going to be replaced as time goes on. And guess what? He was. He doesn't do sound and setup. He didn't lead a community group. He wasn't on our executive committee. And I've seen men promise that, like, hey, that's no problem, role's not my identity. And when this goes away, you realize, oh, it was much more of an identity than they thought. My relationship, which I love, but I don't talk to him the same way. As much, right? Because we were doing it every day. I respect him as much, I was grateful as much, we're still friends, but I don't see him the same way. So you gotta understand what are your motives, what's going in a motive. God will help you with motive. And if you can think through that, I don't believe God's calling me to this. I would say this, you need to know that you're called to do it. Because if you're not sure of that, when expectations aren't met, and I don't think it's just the church planner, God does a lot of stuff in the heart of a team early. He's doing two things at once. I'm expanding the gospel, and I'm sanctifying my people. And I'm not waiting until I get purely sanctified people to expand the gospel. Right? Because that'll never happen. Right? And you get sanctified pastors, right? Yeah, we're just hoping we're saved. But I think there's so much that God was doing early, and I think, man, when I look back at those first couple of years, you were sorting so many things out of my life, and I know in the team as well. So I think in the initial call, I think you need to know, because when you're there and when it's hard, you need to know God called you to it. Because it will be challenging. It'll be exciting, exhilarating, and when you see someone walk away from the Lord, heartbreaking. There are joys inexpressible and sorrows that almost feel unbearable. Like your heart breaks. And then when growth doesn't happen, or a role changes, or someone else is doing, this is where I was serving in the church, and this person's more gifted and it's not the same character. Can I be replaced? And I think God sorts those things. By the way, not to be unkind to us, to rescue us. Right. This is God's love for his people. I'm rescuing you through your love affair with yourself over and over and over again. So how I'm calling, I would say you want to be praying. I'd encourage you, if you're thinking you should be down in the area, let's walk it. Hear what he said. You've been so well served by Jonathan already. Think about the life he described. Okay. Wow. Living in the city does probably make some unique claims. Not claims, right, but in social ways. Privacy. And how you thinking through that. So I think as you hear that, what's happening? That can be very challenging. I mean, I'm hearing them saying, oh, well, I would kill me. So I'm saying, I want to get to where I'm going, you don't want it, and that's just selfishness on my part. Well, guess if I'm on the team, I'm going to bring that with me. And God's got to work through that. So I'm not saying those things disqualify, but those things are things God's doing away after. So get involved in a robust process. You want people asking you hard questions. Where do you think I do this function? How do you think I'm serving? Ask good questions. Pray. Get down there. Walk the streets. And that's what Jeff did. And that's why I was confident that it wasn't a romantic dream. and a glorious dream. And you know what? He's tested. And it's only grown in his heart, not lessened. Because I saw early, I think, the romantic part of the vision. You know, okay, let's get the real part of the vision. And he's lived the real part. You know, he's called to do this. But that was time. So just time for that. So that's a long answer to the question.
Yeah, what you asked that, John?
You took a few of my 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I mean,
There's two guys that want to preach up here.
That's right.
One.
A couple of things simply I would say. One, I can actually do this. These guys don't believe me that I can do this simply. Actually, both Megan and Francis are pretty good at answering this calling question as well, knowing their stories. Ray would too, because he got called to Christ through grace and peace, praise the Lord. So, but if you are grumpy with your present ministry situation, don't think that's part of God calling you to support a job. That's being serious. Being unhappy in a present ministry situation and going to another ministry situation, that next ministry situation, there's no ministry Messiah except Jesus himself. So that isn't going to make you, at the end of the day, any happier. So it's really important to get that motives and stuff, that you're really prayerfully thinking through, am I unhappy in a place, and I think I'm going to be happier in another place. If you're happy in anything other than Jesus, that's a bad place
Right.
at the end of the day. So, I know this is your church, but I'm preaching anyway. So I guess I would just say, it's just the prayerful motives, letting people ask you hard questions about that stuff. It's very important. I'd say the flip side of being called to go is you need to answer just as honestly, are you called to stay?
Right.
I mean, is it just that you are fighting a calling to go? You don't really feel called to stay, but you don't really want to go. You know, I think you need to wrestle through a ministry calling. It takes faith. It takes a decision. You know, I doubt you're going to hear an audible, loud voice from the Lord. If you do, you're probably going to fall down dead anyway. So maybe you will. But the point is that I think it's a dual calling you need to be clear on. So it's not just going; it's also staying. Where is it that you, in good conscience before God, in faith, according to the people that know you well, can agree with that call?
That's good. That was closer to 5 minutes. Good job.
Thank you.
I want to add a girl's perspective. One thing, Warren was praying between Cherry Hill, Pittsburgh, and Wilmington. And he went to those different places, and when he was, I remember Pittsburgh especially, he just didn't like it. He just didn't like it. And we thought, okay, check. And we didn't think that we'd come to New Jersey, because if you live in Pennsylvania, you don't like New Jersey. It's like, that was number 3. But God did some things in our hearts and made it. But this is what I want to say. This is what was so helpful for me, was when the whole process was, Dave was saying, you know, Kim, this is, and there's things as wives where we do submit to our husbands. He said, Kim, this is much more than submitting. This is, are you called to? You have to have the same calling or vision to do this as well. And I so appreciated that, Jeff, I really did, honey. Because everything that he's talking about, I experienced too. And it was good that I could say, well, God's called, I mean, he's called me to him, and of course I'd go wherever God called him. But I would, and I would. But it's good, it was my calling too.
And I would add one more thing. Because I was wrestling with how do I know where. I heard guys tell stories like walking and weeping, you know, through blocks. And I was like, man, I'm not getting that anywhere. And yeah, and that's the point, is how does God generally speak to you?
Right.
Because I was looking for this sign, and almost a sign that lacked faith.
Wow.
It was almost a sense of, God, I need to see this. And I remember at one point, I was out canoeing, and I was going down to Delaware, just place where I'd seen an eagle before, the bald eagle, and I said, Lord, if you show me an eagle again, I'll know it's true. And the Lord,
There's that charismatic side. Real sturdy, right?
Well, no, I was going to get more, because then I heard the voice for it. No, it's not. This is what I said from God. It was just like, stop asking. It was actually a rebuke. Because I think it was this. You want to do this without faith. And you don't, I'm not going to do that. Because you need faith for this call. And then when I put it back, and I remember talking to Dave Hardy about this, because I was, how do I know? How do you know? He goes, well, how does God generally talk to you? Well, for me, it's like, it's more like he usually puts puzzles together. And it's just piece after piece. And there are other guys, like God that has the burden of weeks, praise God. Your experience of that, don't impose someone else's on how God speaks to you. Just when we hear someone else's experience, and that gets in the place of the gospel and scripture. God's a good father. He talks to, he knows you as his child. He's going to talk to you, right? He's going to communicate. So I think you can have confidence to speak, but you're going to need to have faith. You didn't give the guarantee that we're going to do this and succeed, which is what I want.
That's good. Yeah. Good. Next, stay up here. Let's go open up to questions first. But in fact, actually, you can share with Dad. So I'm going to share with Bill first. So Bill, can you come up here? We appreciate Bill for being here. Bill is of Festa, really, and in South Philly. So Bill, can you just talk about, obviously these folks, people are considering are all going to be moving into South Philly, and you've seen probably more homes than you wish you saw with us, and all through that process. But just what would you say people are considering renting, buying, what should they know about market conditions, and kind of talk about some of those nuts and bolts a little bit?
Sure. Before I answer that, I want to thank all of you for allowing me to be a part of this. I mean, this is so exciting for me to see happen, and to just be able to watch this is just a blessing. I don't know what I'm doing up here with all this wisdom, but I'll do the best that I can to make sure that I don't disappoint you. As far as what's going on in the city, as far as renting and purchasing, is that the question?
Yeah.
It really does depend on whether you know or not what your future is going to hold. If you just want to try the area out, I would suggest that maybe renting would be the better way. Renting is short term. Purchasing is long term. You purchase, in addition to your down payment, you're going to have settlement costs. And if you have to sell, you're going to have settlement costs. So if there's $15,000 to purchase just in settlement costs, and $15,000 just in settlement costs to sell, to just try it and see if it's happening is not a good idea to purchase. So for renting, I would suggest if you're just looking to get a feel for the area, it's a lot more short term, 6 months, a year, 2 years.
So if you're considering renting, what's we have the neighborhoods that we've looked at, so kind of Washington, South Side, well, what's a typical rental prices? What's going on there?
It's going to vary from neighborhood to neighborhood, and in South Philadelphia, neighborhoods change in 2 blocks. You could go from Center City to Ghetto, really, in a matter of 2 or 3 blocks. So depending on where you rent, let's say middle of the road, an area that's sort of a lower level, $650, $750, $850 for a house, for a small house. If you're in some of the better areas, Bella Vista, Italian Market, Pensport, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 as an average. I'll tell you what you can do if you want to just remember this or jot this down. There is a site called rentometer.com. R-E-N-T, the letter O, the word meter.com. And you can just plug in an address, and it'll tell you what the rents are in that general vicinity. That might be a good resource for you. By the way, there's a lot of things. I'm just showing you.
No, you go ahead.
There's a lot of good things happening in South Philadelphia.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's a lot of areas that you're hearing about that it might be safe, it might not be safe, and a lot of that is true. But the big picture is unbelievable. Does everybody here pretty much know what South Philadelphia looks like? Have you been there? Do you know what the area is like? Okay. You have Center City on one side of South Philadelphia. And now what's happening on the other side of South Philadelphia is the naval base. They've taken what was a naval base and they've converted it to a business park, so to speak. It's almost like a campus atmosphere down there. And any one of you, if you want to take a tour of it, we'll take you for a tour and you'll see businesses going down there. They're talking about extending the subway down there. They're putting marinas in and cruise terminals. And what's literally happening is we're having another Center City at the other end of Broad Street. In addition to that, you have although it's not happening the way it's supposed to happen, you have the waterfront developing. And it's kind of happening haphazardly, there's no real plan. But when it does get going, you've got the waterfront on one side, Center City, or traditional Center City on the other side, and then at the other end of Broad Street, the naval base, which, by the way, has more square footage than Center City, Philadelphia. And South Philadelphia is right in the middle of all of that. So what's happening now is you're seeing a revitalization of every single neighborhood. There's not one neighborhood that is not going through revitalization. So in 20 years, you're not going to recognize it. It's basically going through what Brooklyn went through 20, 30 years ago. And South Philadelphia will now become the Center City housing market. The market that supplies housing to the waterfront, Center City, and the South Philadelphia areas. Some areas are just in the beginning of that progression, and other areas are there and very expensive to get into.
That's helpful. That's very helpful. So how about house prices? Give some lows and highs and all around to neighborhoods that we've looked at.
Yeah, actually,
absolutely. So that will help you. Thanks, Bud.
I put some folders together. In one of those folders is a map of the neighborhoods in South Philadelphia. Pricing, man, that's tough. It can go, depending on the neighborhood that you're willing to live in, it can go anywhere from $80,000 to $125,000. There are the areas that have a lot of potential. And then you can get into, and again, just a few blocks away, a house that costs $400,000, $500,000, $750,000. So really, depending on your budget, it depends on what you want to do. I mean, personally, I would rather get in on some of those areas that are just starting the revitalization and take advantage of the low prices. There's a neighborhood that needs to be ministered to. So no matter where you go, whether you buy in a $1.5 million neighborhood or a $50,000 neighborhood, there's a mission field there that needs to be reached. And by the way, be prepared for culture shock. If you haven't lived in the city, like our brother here was talking about, you're going to have to learn how to parallel park.
He's been out driving with me, so he knows that.
If you drive like Jeff, you're going to need to learn how to parallel park. But you're also going to have to live in close quarters with a lot of different cultures. There's so many different cultures. There'll be Buddhist, there'll be Islam, there'll be gay, there'll be staunch Catholic, there'll be hipsters. There'll be so many different cultures that you'll have an opportunity to minister to, and I believe that the Lord will just gravitate to those that you'll relate to the best.
That's good.